All right, so hey, we're just having a little conversation with a philosopher, a self-proclaimed philosopher named Socradeez on Discord, just some random guy that I found and thought some of the things that he was talking about, some of his ideas, some of his thought processes and whatnot were pretty interesting and just kind of wanted to have a one-on-one conversation with him. So I'm just going to go ahead and let him introduce himself, and then also he has a Twitch channel, so you can plug that. And so go for it.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Name's Socradeez. I developing a moral framework based off of my model for consciousness and intelligence, and also based off of game theory. And apparently, Mr. James finds that pretty interesting. So we're going to talk about that today.
Yeah, yeah. So, the first thing I kind of wanted you to do was just kind of like do a broad outline of like over your just kind of like overarching thought processes and like ideas on just life and whatnot. I guess just very broadly.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, I submit or I hold the idea, the materialistic idea that or the idea of materialism, that we are all essentially physical entities, right? We are simply made up of matter and nothing else. There is no spiritual or divine aspect to our existence, that our consciousness, our sapience, our intelligence, whatever you want to call it, it is simply a product of a mechanical process that happens in our brain on an electron level. And essentially, there will hopefully be a moral and philosophical framework derived from that once I can get everything figured out.
Yeah. So I remember talking with you briefly earlier, and so like, what's kind of your like outlook on just like life in general, like how we should perceive life? Yeah, I guess just start from
Well,
there.
a lot of people look for meaning in life, and I guess that'll probably be a good place to start, because I mean that's really where it all started for me. Was thinking about the meaning of life. Why am I here?
Right.
When it's actually funny because I heard a White Stripes song that kind of changed my perspective on it. And in the chorus, he says, "You can't take the effect." And it wasn't until much later that I applied this to the thought of, the meaning of life. But in reality, your life doesn't have a cause. It's not the cause. It's simply the effect, right? It's the
Yeah.
effect of your parents reproducing, essentially. That is your meaning. That's why you are here. You're not here to fulfill a purpose. You're not here to, because something put you here, because something designed you to be here. It's simply because two organisms decided that they wanted to reproduce, and now you are here as a result of it. And
Right.
now you have to deal with that.
So like, like when you talk about stuff like that, like I definitely start to like agree and definitely start to like resonate with some of the stuff that you say, because yeah, when you say that like life doesn't really have like there's no like deeper meaning or deeper like value to life, it's like yeah, like I don't think that there is either, but for me that's always been kind of like a liberating thought. It's not like, oh, like, what's the point in doing anything? It's more of like, what's the point in like, worrying about stuff? What's the point in like caring about things that like you don't that like don't really affect you? Like why shouldn't like you strive to do what you want if there is no deeper meaning to life? If like to you and to your life, like that's all that really matters, at least in your outlook, then like yeah, I just always kind of found that as like a very liberating thought.
Yeah, and it sounds like your view is subscribing to the more hedonistic idea of how to deal with nihilism, which is, to basically say, well, if there is no meaning, then I'll just do whatever I want, and any human typically wants is to increase their pleasure, right? That's one of the main
Sure,
lower
yeah.
level drive.
I mean, yeah, like to a degree, I mean, yeah, no, I think broadly speaking, yeah, like that's what most or if not all humans want, is just to increase their pleasure.
Right. And
Yeah.
so For me, however, I realize that pleasure only has a superficial and subjective context that, when removed, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to do some of the things that you would do in that context, right? So,
Like, yeah, can just give an example really quick so I could
like reproduction, for instance, right? Because reproduction is something that a lot of people want to do, right? It's something that a lot
sure.
of people see as very important to their lives and to bring them joy and stuff like that. But whenever you take out the joy and fulfillment aspect of it, the lower level functions that drive us to that, you realize that in reality, you are creating an instantiation of yourself that is subject to any possible negative or positive effect that you have also experienced, or better, or even worse, right? And
Yeah.
so most of that is just put completely by the wayside whenever evaluating this decision or whenever taking the action itself. When in reality, I believe that since those feelings are subjective, that we can't make our decisions based on those on an objective level. And if we want to try to be more objective.
Like from an individual outlook, like you kind of know what like makes you happy is and like what pleasures you, I guess. So it's like rather than like indulging in them within reason, like you wouldn't kind of like go into that thought process of just kind of like you know doing what makes you happy and just like saying like this is what like this is all we have, so like might as well like that, right?
Right. So as I was talking about in the Discord, there are really two layers, at least in my model of intelligence. There's two layers to our thought process. There's the lower level functions and higher level functions. Lower level functions are anything that is part of our genetic programming that has evolved over the millennia, that helped us to survive before we developed language, right? Before we developed the higher level functions.
Right, so it's like our
Animals,
biological like natural like fight or flight stuff like that kind of, right? Right.
instincts and emotions, essentially.
Okay.
So animals, they that's all they have for the most part. Dogs can learn language and everything like that, but for the most part, they simply rely on these lower level functions, these drives that, they make logical sense in that context of an animal, because these drives typically help them to reproduce, and because of natural selection, the ones that are have these drives are the ones that are able to reproduce more and propagate further.
Right.
Then once we developed language, the it kind of changed how our brain processed information and allowed us to begin compiling and compartmentalizing concepts and into labels.
Right.
And that way we can compile really large functions outside of those feelings that we have, right? So, for instance, we can learn about concepts themselves, relational concepts from, and so on and so forth. And then we can begin to actually apply these concepts kind of almost arbitrarily to each other, and try to get out some plausible new from that. And those are the higher level functions, right? That's reason, basically.
So I mean, all right, so like I mean like just kind of bluntly like like what's your kind of like your overall like point from that, right?
Well, the point was simply that the lower level functions are the ones that I was talking about a second ago,
Yeah, yeah.
and they were really drives people to do things and to want things, and that's what like the pleasure comes from and stuff like that. But as long as you have that higher level reasoning coming from it, then that kind of separates it.
Well, I mean, so it like in the sense of like relationships and stuff like that, like for example, like isn't that kind of like when they like merge in a way? Because I understand it's like a relationship or like wanting to be in a relationship isn't necessarily just like a higher function because ultimately like part of the relationship is like doing the uh, wanting to mate or whatever, have children or stuff like that. Um,
Yeah, there's a lot of lower level functions that go into that. You know, wanting to mate, wanting to reproduce, social acceptance, having someone there that will always be able to provide a source of like reliability and security and things like that. But there's also, like, for instance, if you look at it from a reasonable perspective and you say, well, okay, this person provides for me, and this person gives me what I need, and almost a value proposition based on it, or a value equation, and figure out that it's more valuable to you to be with that person, right? One of the things that I was getting at with the higher level functions is that higher level functions work on the premise that you're always trying to reach a future state, right?
sure, yeah.
That's how the process works. And so without the future state, you're only left to be at the whim of the lower level functions. So if your future state isn't, then you're going to rely mostly on those lower level functions to help you figure out if you've reached that state or not.
Um, all right. So I know we already established that like you don't believe that like when it comes to like life, just like the broad aspect of life, that there's no true like meaning to it. Like there's no like deeper like there's no like point to like you being born, right? It's just something
Right.
that happened. And I'd probably agree with that, right? Like me being someone who's not super religious, I wouldn't consider myself an atheist, but I'm not like a Christian or anything, right? I'm not a religious person. Um, but I know in the Discord you were kind of talking about like you were like I don't you would you say you're pro suicide or just kind of like kind of like go into that a little bit, explain
Yeah.
your
So basically, one of the aspects of my whole model is the concept of free agency, which is the idea that any agent, an agent is any like clump of mass that can uh, basically make decisions,
right.
right? It
Okay.
can take an input from the world around it, and it can figure out through some process to take some action or to do something else, right? So a free agent is an agent that has an ability to maintain two separate states at once, right? So humans have at least in my model, the illusion of free will, which is free will,
Sure.
right? So
Wait, hold
because
on. Wait, so
the human,
so you're wait, are so you're saying that like because we have the illusion of free will that we actually have free will? I'm sorry.
yes,
Okay. All right.
right.
Fair
So
enough.
because I'm fairly certain that our intelligence is to an extent deterministic, right? But because we can maintain the future the outcome of either choice, because we can recognize the fact that there is a choice, on all practical levels, that is free will,
Right.
right? And so
Oh.
that's what a free agent is.
Right. Oh, sorry.
The If you take the rules of the free agent, right, which are defined by simply whatever the free agent is and how it works, and then you take humans, the rule agent, they need to eat, uh, they need to, they are driven to reproduce, they're driven to clump together in societies, things like that. And then you take the rules of the system itself, often called the game in game theory,
Sure.
um, and those rules would be the rules of our universe, our physical laws, right? Um, and then you can begin to devise new subsystems based off of that in order to help the agents reach a desired outcome. And so that's what my philosophical framework works to do, is take this idea of free agency and derive new political and social ideas and concepts from using those rules.
Yeah. like especially when it comes to free will, because I know a lot of people out there, or at least I've heard a few people talk about free will. It's like we don't actually have like free will, um, because they like say because you don't have like the choice of where you're born or like what outcome, like what like socioeconomic class you're going to be born into or where you're going to be born, and a lot of that dictates like how you're going to perceive life and everything. I still kind of do believe like the fact like I believe the best analogy would be like a choose your own adventure book if you like did those as a kid or read those or know what those are.
Yeah.
So it's like, you're not like totally in control of like every aspect, but like within your own life, there are like you do have free will in like certain areas. And I do think we should, as a society, kind of like work to increase free will or like increase the amount of choices that you have, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and in my model, because of how free agency works, the I guess the opinions, the ideas of any human, any subjective human, is only as important as the ideas of another. There isn't
Um,
any that's more important or less important, right?
I
So,
mean, like, so like like my life to me is the most important life there is, but then it like in the outcome of like or in the view of like society or just like people as a whole, then yeah, like I don't really matter. So yeah, like I would agree with you if you're just talking about like um people as a whole, I guess, or like as a society like broadly, but if you're talking about like individually, um probably wouldn't agree if that makes any
well,
sense.
so for instance, what we were talking about with suicide, right?
Yeah.
If a person believes and is able to reason that they don't really value their own life, then someone else putting a value on their life apart from them should not supersede the person's desire to not live, right?
Um
Because they're the value that the rest of everyone else puts on them, even though they don't put any value, the value that everyone else puts on should not supersede and overwrite the fact that they don't value.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would probably agree, but the thing is, like, when it comes to suicide, I think, like, if that's what would truly make you happy, if, like, killing yourself was, like, the only thing that was, like, really going to make you happy, then, like, then, yeah, like, you should probably be within your own means to, like, do that. And I think you are, but I think when a lot of people, like, want, like, feel that they want to commit suicide, um, like that's not actually like what they want. They're just in a dark place. So I think when it comes to um, suicide, it's kind of like a case by case scenario. But I think most people who want to commit suicide don't actually like that's not what would truly like make them happy. Like they're not coming from like a like if you know what I'm trying to
Yeah, I
say.
mean, I mean, most of the people that are on like suicide watch and really kind of want to or do commit suicide, typically that an area of emotional distress or emotional damage, which again these are lower level functions, and
Yeah.
because we no longer live in the world that the lower level functions were designed for, they don't work how they were initially meant to work, right? How they evolved to work.
Yeah.
Instead, our society causes them to kind of go haywire sometimes. And that causes, depression. It causes severe issues. It can cause you to be manic and depressive. So you have to make sure that, the person is coming of rational thought and is able to back up all of the reasons why they would want to be able and articulate the reasons and define why they would not want to continue existence. And that would have to be a process that would have to be worked out if this was ever to be implemented. But
Yeah. Like.
I
All right.
definitely agree that it does happen, that there are people who are able to see it from a rational perspective as opposed to an irrational one.
Yeah, sure. Like for instance, like with me, like I always kind of saw that as like an out or like a choice that I had, not a choice that I would ever like see. Like I've never seriously considered it necessarily, but it's definitely something that I think is there. Like it's not like oh, it's like this thing that I could never do. It's like you know I don't know, and that also is kind of like a relieving thought to me, I guess, that I like do have a like if life was ever to get like so bad that like I just couldn't take it anymore. It's like yeah, like I don't know. I find that kind of like to be a comforting thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely comforting for people to have an alternative whenever things seem like there is no alternative.
Yeah.
Uh, because that's a product of the way that our consciousness work or our intelligence works. Um, and I'm hoping that through developing our or a model of intelligence that we'll be able to kind of answer and really come to a conclusion on a lot of these hot topics, these debates, and everything. Because really, what it boils down to whenever you have these debates is the nature of intelligence and the fact that we can't prove what our intelligence actually is and how it works.
Um. I mean, I think I kind of always defined like what makes humans, because I think that's like when we talk about intelligence, like that's kind of what we're referring to is like what makes us unique when it comes to like all other like living organisms or like life forms that we've like come into contact with or like experienced, like what makes us so
Right.
different. And I think it's just kind of like the thought process of like being able to like understand that we are like a sense of self-understanding, if that isn't too vague of a concept for you to like
So
yeah.
So in my model of intelligence, I actually separate intelligence into consciousness and sapience. And at least like because a lot of people use consciousness to define what I define as intelligence. And so intelligence is like the overarching model, right? It combines the irrational and or the lower level functions and the rational or higher level functions. The sapience, which is what I believe you were just referring to, which is just the set of higher level functions, right? We are Homo sapiens.
Right.
So the sapience is what defines our sapience, I guess,
Yeah.
or
Um
what gives us that distinction. And then consciousness, in my model, is actually I define a conscious entity as any agent that maintains a representative state of itself as part of its decision making, right? So it's essentially self awareness, and in that context, most animals are self aware. Most multicellular animals are self aware
really?
because they know that, or they have some sort of representation of themselves apart from the world within their brain.
Um all right. I mean like I'm not super well versed with like I mean when it comes down to like philosophy in general, like when it comes to philosophy, I'm pretty new on most stuff. So I mean most of like a lot of the claims that I make aren't backed by anything. So yeah, I guess I'm just, wrong when it comes to like that. Like when it comes to
Well,
like
no, I'm not necessarily saying that you're wrong. I
oh,
mean,
I mean
the
like if
thing
you are
is that
that's
these
fine
these
cuz I don't know what I'm
concepts
talking
haven't
about.
actually, yeah, but these concepts haven't actually been defined throughout history,
Oh,
right?
okay.
They've been very loosely defined because we don't have a model for how the brain works. What I'm attempting to do is basically posit a theory for how I believe find all of these terms within that theory.
And
And so that'll hopefully allow for a little bit on how we think about these.
right. And I just wanted to kind of like confirm, like I would assume this is the case, but I just wanted to confirm with you, like this kind of like your thought process is pretty like it like secular, right? Like I don't think this is compatible with religion, like organized religion. So like I would say like Christianity and whatnot, correct?
You're asking if it's compatible?
Yeah, like your thought process, like for instance, if I was like if I was a Christian, like I don't think I would be able to. I don't think like your thought process and like Christianity are compatible, right?
Uh, Probably not, because most religions uh, basically think that the universe was built here simply for humans.
Right.
Now, if you take the universe as from a materialism perspective, like is a foundation for my views, then you could say that maybe there is a an entity outside or above or over our universe that created it, but in reality there's really no point in thinking about that because all we can see and prove, and this would be more of like a what's the word I'm looking for? Empiricist perspective is that only anything that can be defined and measured can be proven. So since that's outside of our universe, then there's really no point in talking about it or factoring it into any of the definable concepts that we have here. And
Right.
I think that if you're religious and you believe in a god, like the concept of a god apart from our universe, that's not necessarily in direct
Right.
conflict.
Like
But if you
me. Yeah. Like I. Yeah. No. I was
right,
talking
but if
more
you
towards like
but if
established religious people.
yeah, and if you hold the idea that the universe was created solely so that humans could achieve some sort of goal, then yeah, that's in direct conflict with my views because uh, I don't think there is any goal,
Right.
which is why I believe that suicide is perfectly okay if you're able to see it from a rational perspective because there really is no meaning, there's no purpose, so you're not really like letting anything down by stopping living, right?
Right.
You're not failing anything, you're not causing any problems really.
Yeah. Well, I
So
mean, you could make the argument that you're causing problems to like your family and whatnot, but yeah, no, I get what you're saying, like broadly.
well no, because then if you were to say that you were causing problems for your family, I could just as easily say, well, the family brought the problem on themselves by creating me.
Um, I mean, you like that would work for your parents. I don't know if I would necessarily even agree with that. I just don't know how I would go about arguing against that. But like I don't think that argument would work for like your like a brother or like a sibling or something, right? Like they didn't have a
Yeah, but I
choice in it
mean,
either.
right, but at the same time, like I don't feel like we have any obligation to people just because we're related to them.
All right. Yeah.
I mean, there's like a social obligation that's implied and that's kind of uh, that we learn about. But again, I feel like that's a learned obligation. I feel like there are lower level functions that drive us towards a family mentality, right? That make us want to be a part of a family. But and usually we typically go towards the ones that we're biologically related to. But I don't feel like from the free agency perspective that there's any obligation to our family. In fact, I actually stopped talking to mine
Oh, okay.
because they didn't really seem to help me towards the goals that I was looking for, and in fact wanted me to conform to their goals and values, which didn't align
Right.
with mine.
Right. Like you were looking for help and then they thought they were going to help you by like trying to convert you or trying to get them to agree with them kind of in a way, right?
Yeah, you could say something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like yeah, when it comes down to like stuff like that, I just kind of like to have things simplified a little bit. Like when it comes to like actual like what you're trying to say, I think it's good to just try to like put it into simple terms, at least for me, cuz
Yeah, I mean,
just
basically, you think about it like if you're trying to help somebody, right? You can only help them so much as you can understand what their goal is.
right.
And if you actually cannot comprehend, if you cannot emulate their goal, then how are you going to be able to help them? You're not going to be able to. And if the goal that you think they have is actually completely opposite and in conflict with the goal that they actually have, then all you're going to be doing is harming them, or not necessarily harming, but keeping them from reaching their goal. You're going
Yeah,
to make
I
it
mean
more
I
difficult.
would say that that would be harming them, right? Um
Yeah,
uh so two things I wanted to get your opinion on. So the first is, do you think like religion is then like a like would you consider religion to be kind of like a way to rationalize like a way for people to deal with like death and like the nihilistic kind of like thought process and whatnot?
I think it could definitely come from that. I think that religion probably didn't stem from any one phenomenon. It was probably a combination of many
Well, I mean
different
like the
ones.
concept of religion, right? Like just
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
even then, like it still stems from a lot of different things. So if you look historically, I mean, religion wasn't only just a why are we here? It must be this. It was also a means to keep order in a lot of places. It was, a means of cultural standardization in a lot of places. It was a means for education.
Yeah.
So, there
Also
was a
war
lot
and
of
whatnot. I would, like getting people to
right.
like, die for like a country when, you know, like if you reassure like, oh, if you die for a good cause, then you're just gonna go to like an afterlife and it'll be great. Um, yeah, like that
Right.
kind
So,
of
so
concept.
there are a lot of external factors that help to instantiate religion as a pillar of human existence on this earth.
Okay.
So while it, that may be one of the factors, nihilism, the question of why are we here? What is our purpose? And the question of why are we here? What is our purpose actually stems from the sapient process that I was referring to earlier, right?
All
Because
right.
in that process, there always has to be some goal to reach,
All
right?
right.
That's how the process works. And without a goal to like a definable goal to reach, then it our brain
All
can't
right.
do anything with that,
Um,
right? It just starts to flounder around and it starts to try and apply features where it can to come up with an answer, and it just comes up with the best one that it possibly can.
all right. I will be right back, and then we can kind of wrap up. All right.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Sorry about that. Oh, 1 second. Hello. Hello.
Sorry, I think you might have cut out there.
Is this better? Hello.
Yeah, there you
Okay.
go.
There we go. So yeah. I mean, like, so when it comes down to like I just want to revisit the suicide thing again. So, like, do you think a majority of people who want to commit suicide, like, not people who are like, oh, I have a terminal illness, I'm going to die, and I'm suffering, like that. I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking about like people who are just like, um, in the mindset where it's like, I want to end my life. Do you think most of that comes from, or most of those people are kind of like rational, or do you think that's like a very, 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 uh, like not many people are, I guess.
Well, so I think it's a systemic issue from the sapient process, right? You typically, so for instance, one of the ones I see really often is somebody will go through a really bad breakup,
Yeah.
right? And they'll say that they don't really have anymore, right? They just want distance right now. Typically, the reason that that happens is because they have developed all these future states that they were planning on achieving, and those future states of the premise that they were going to continue to be with this person.
Right.
And once that premise is just, the brain has been reorganizing all of the future states, which is very tedious, and the brain sometimes can't even do it by itself. Sometimes it takes, external factors to help it along.
All right.
And so that can really hit somebody whenever your entire self is dependent on keeping continuously meeting those, because that's how your behavior is designed, I guess, is by imagining, trying to make it change for the better
Oh,
in your
oh,
brain.
oh, hold on. 1 second. 1 second. I think my internet is. Yeah. 1 second. Um. All right. Yeah. No, I'm fine now. Sorry about that. Go.
But
Can you?
yeah, that's just one of those systemic issues from the nature of our state.
Right. Um. So to kind of like finish off, do you just kind of want to like, uh, give like another like just broad clarification, or anything else you want to touch on or whatnot?
No, I mean, there's a lot that goes into this, and I'll be refining both the model of intelligence, model for the philosophical and moral framework based off of that. This is probably for a year longer than that. And hopefully we'll have like a book or something come out eventually that covers depth. But as it is, I haven't really been able to organize and articulate the information in a very organized way.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something where it's like putting the information together and, kind of like trying to have it into a kind of like a thing to where people can like kind of read it and like understand it to where it's, appealing to people, I guess. Yeah, I mean, because like I think
Right, right,
right, like I agree with you. I think I like just off of like talking from with you like briefly, like I'm kind of halfway there, but there's still a couple things where it's like I'm not fully sure about, I guess. Um, but no, like definitely when you talk about like nihilism and like the fact that like like the internal struggle, I think individually it's kind of uh like how we rationalize like the boredom and dealing with just like the fact that like this is it, like this is just what life is, like there's nothing like deeper to it and whatnot. Like I like yeah,
right.
that's why I think like a lot of it like the main points, I guess, or that's what like really fascinates me, I guess, about
Yeah, and,
your.
and you know, I definitely encourage you to ponder this more in your spare time, and if you come up with any questions or you're just curious about my thoughts on anything, we can talk. And I'd be happy to sit down with you and do this again, and we
Yeah,
could revisit it and maybe get a little more in depth on some
sure. I would
things or
definitely
expand.
be down for that. If you want to plug anything, like your Twitch, you can do that now.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, check me out on Twitch. Check me out on YouTube. Just you can search Socradeez Gaming on Twitch. I think I'm Socradeez
all right.
TV on YouTube, and all I've got on there is some gaming content right now. But I'm probably going to start moving my philosophical work towards like Twitch and YouTube to try and like reach out to people and communicate with the external world as I'm developing these ideas a little bit more now that I've got the foundations in place.
All
So
right.
come check me out, talk, ask questions if you want.
Right. And if there's anyone that wants to do something like this, where you just kind of do a one-on-one little talk, like I said, I'd be down to do it again with you. But if anyone else has something you want to talk about, you know, let's do it. But other than that, I think that's probably gonna wrap this up. But yeah, if there's anything else you would like to talk about in the future or whatnot, just hit me up. All right.
Sounds good, Jay.
All right.